Good evening, everybody.
Kabot Haraf, how are you?
Hashem, thank you. Okay. Just doing the Facebook. Okay. Yeah, so we were finishing the phase of the Bet Yosef. Just remembered we had some more stuff there. Right, so it says in the Bet Yosef like this. We read in the tour yesterday, "V'yagbiya ke'ara sheba amatzot." So what he says, right, you have to lift up now the plate or the tray which has the matzot on it. So where's the source for this? It says Bet Yosef. Sham Kuf Tet Vav, it's in the Gemara. למה עוקרים השולחן כדי שיכירו התינוקות וישאלו וכתבו התוספות? So it says there, right, why do we remove the table, as we're starting the Haggadah? Again, right, that the children should ask questions, they should be curious, inquisitive, right, and this makes for a good education. It's an educational night, after all. That's what it's all about, right? Okay, so then he goes on, וכתבו התוספות, says תוספות, והראש, והעידנא ששולחנות שלנו גדולים וטורח לסלקן, מסלקין הקערה שבה המצות וכאילו אינם רוצים לאכול יותר. So says תוספות, right? A little bit funny what he says. Is that the תוספות? Yeah, והעידנא. Let me just see, make sure who says this. Yeah, תוספות and the Rosh. They wrote like this, right? They said that nowadays, he says, our tables are large. So why does he say that our tables are large? What happened? The tables got bigger all of a sudden? There's that, famous picture, right, of the president of Russia, right, with the big table. He's got that big table there. We're not talking about something big like that. We're talking about, your normal dining room table. So why does he say it's large? Because in the times of Talmud, what happened was that everybody had like a private table, that a small little table that would be brought to them. So there was like several tables going on there. Nowadays, we have like one table for everybody, right? That's the way it is now. In those days, it wasn't like that. So that's why he says that. So he says, therefore, since we have big tables nowadays, so it would be like a real bother to remove the whole table, right? So what does that mean? Can you imagine like lifting the table up, just like removing it? That would be a little bit of a stretch, right? So therefore, he says, right, we don't need to do that. So that's a little bit going too far. So then, what should we do? So he says we should just lift up the tray with the matzot and take it out. And that'll do the same job. What does that mean? It looks like, oh, gee, we're done eating, So, the children will ask, right? If they're inquisitive, they're the inquisitive types. They'll ask, oh, gee whiz, like, why are you taking out the food? We didn't even eat yet dinner. That's, well, I'll tell you, my son, right? I'll tell you what's going on. Right? So you tell them the story there. Okay, that's the idea. So then he goes on. וכך כתב רשב"ם, that's what it says in רשב"ם, וזה לשונו, that's the language of רשב"ם. והנה מילי לדידהו דהבה להו שולחן קטן. So he says the same thing, right, as the Rosh and Tosfot, that that applies to them, that they had small tables in those days. Each one had his own personal table, לפני מי שאומר אגדה לבדו, right, so the one who read the Haggadah had his own personal table, and everybody else as well. So he says, but we have a big table. So, you got to be pretty strong to take out the table. It's a lot of work. So therefore, right, what we do is we remove the tray. Makes it easier. ומצה ומרור, so it says we remove the tray which has the matzah and the maror there. And also the two cooked dishes, right? So we put that at the end of the table. So he says that's enough for us, right? We don't need to do more than that. חינם, ואין כאן הכר לתינוק. So he says there are those that have a custom, they just like pick up that tray, like on their hand, with their hand, right, whatever, on their palm, they pick it up. So he said that doesn't really do the job, what I mean, like, because it's not going to have the desired results. Just picking it up. אבל עוקרין הקערה לגמרי ונותנים את בקרן זווית. So he says, therefore, what we should do, in order to get the desired results, as we said, right, to have the children asking questions, we should lift up the tray and, put it in the corner, he says, right? Something like that, In other words, it should look like, you're deviating from the normal custom, right? Something really strange. So the children will ask questions. Okay, good. So then he goes on. As if like they already ate. The children should ask questions. So he says that resembles like just picking up the table and removing it altogether, right? So that's the end of it. Then he goes, וכתב הגאות מימוניות, says this rabbi, ושמח also this rabbi, כשהוא מתחיל, when he starts, halachmania, that reading that portion, halachmania, which means this is the bread of poverty, right? You're telling your family there, right? Whatever. Yagbia kiara veikarena viakrena. So, right, as we said, pick up the tray and again, right, remove it milefanav. As we said, right, remove it from there. Veitinena besof hashulchan, and put it at the end of the table. And then when you start avadim hainu, right, that part, which means we were slaves. Then we return it, right? So that's the story. And that's when we do the manishtana, right? And that time, asking the questions, blah blah blah. והראש כתב בתשובה. So the Rosh writes in the Tshuva, יגביה קערה ויאמר הלחמניה. Pick up the tray and say halachmania, which means this is a bed of poverty. Ad manishtana, until manishtana, right? Manishtana, as we said, right? Who says the manishtana? The children should say that, right? One of the kids, right? If you don't have a kid, so then, right? Let's say it's a couple, right? Husband and wife. So the wife will read it to the husband, right? And the husband will answer. What about if it's a lonely guy, right? Just him, nobody else, right? But the walls, right? The four walls. So what do you do then? You read it to yourself, right? You ask yourself the questions, and you yourself answer the questions, right? Hopefully, you're not going to be alone for Passover, right? But if you are, this is what you do. Okay. Good. So then he goes on to say, then you take the tray, Sheba means matzot, which you have the matzot there, ויצווה להסירה, and then you tell them to take it out, right? Remove it. Please remove that tray, right? מעל השולחן, from the table, כדי שיראה התינוק, in order that the child should see that, right? The children, whatever, וישאל, and you should ask questions, למה משחקים עליכם? Why are we removing the table? What's going on? We didn't eat dinner yet. ועדיין לא אכלנו, וגם מוזגין כוס שני. And then, right, he says, at that point, we also pour out the second cup of wine and mix it, right, with a little bit of water, as we said, right? It's a nice idea to mix it with a little bit of water. Not obligation, really, but nowadays, not obligation, but it's good. According to Kabbalah, whatever, right? All that stuff. So, Shani, מוזגין כוס שני, כדי שישאל התינוק, לפי שאין דרך למזוג שתי כוסות קודם האכילה. So this is also meant to, right, make the children ask questions. Why? Because usually, right, we have like one drink before the dinner. Now we're having another one, second one, right, which is like unusual, right? What's going on, right? We're having two cocktails instead of one. What's going on with that, right? So it's another way to make them inquisitive. Okay, good. וכך הם דברי רבנו. So that's the way the two writes, רבנו. Okay. Good. ומה שכתב רבנו, that's what the Torah says, ויש מדקדקים להוציא ממנה את התבשילין, so it says some are particular to remove the cooked dishes, ואין צריך לדווקא, you don't have to do that. כשאומר פסח, זה דווקא כשאומר פסח שהיו אבותינו אוכלים, because when you say, right, that this Pesach, Korban Pesach, that our parents were eating, whatever, and so forth, so on, וכך כתב שם תוספות ברשב"ם, that's what they wrote, these rabbis. וכך כתב הגאות מימון, they also wrote this. So again, right, what was that last thing he said here? Make sure we understand, right? One more time. So he says some are particular to remove the cooked dishes. You don't have to do that, he says. Okay, whatever. We don't do that. Everything stays together in one place. Okay, good. So let's see Shulchan Aruch, right? Vav. Yeah, so says Shulchan Aruch, notel yadav letzorech tivul lashon. Right, so what you do is, as we said, after you make kiddush, next step is you go wash your hands, right, for eating the karpas. So we don't bless on the washing, right, netilat yadayim, because we're not eating bread at this point. We're just having a vegetable. And as we said, right, there's a machloket whether that requires a blessing or not. So therefore, we don't bless. The rule is, right, when it comes to blessings, when in doubt, throw it out, right? Safik brachot le'akel. If it's a doubt, we don't bless. Why is that, by the way? What's the reason why? because it could be a blessing in vain, right? That's number one. Could be a blessing in vain, which is a big sin. And another thing is that the reason why we don't bless is that what do I want to say? It's a blessing. Number one, yeah, it's a blessing in vain. Number one, and number two, right? Okay, I'll remember. I don't. It's on the tip of my tongue. I'll get it back. Bezat Hashem. So anyway, I'll get back to you on that one. So he says, right, that as we said, we don't bless because it's a blessing in vain, and
Because we have to bless before Hamosi.
yeah, that's true, but that's a different issue altogether, right? That's a different stage. But the question, all right, so why don't we bless? It's a machloket. There's a dispute. Could be a blessing in vain, and if you bless, and I forget whatever. Well, I'll get back to that. Anyway, right. So let's go on. So then he says,
Kabbalah Harav, could it be that we don't bless with the bracha because it's the dipping, the actual dipping has to do with that you explained to us yesterday? That we wash the hands because of the dipping, or
right. So the thing is that it's a machloket whether you're supposed to bless on that, So therefore, when there's a machloket, we don't bless because of the doubt. When in doubt, throw it out, right? As we said. You know what I mean? It's a machloket whether that requires a blessing or not. That's what we said yesterday. So therefore, we don't bless. I'll get back to that when it comes back to me. So anyway, right? Anyway, so then what do we do after that? Bikach mi karpas. So we take the karpas. Achot mi kazait. Right? As we said, it should be less than a kazait. So it should be a very small piece, right? Like the size of, like a bubble gum, piece of bubble gum there, something like that, right? And you bless on that. We don't. What do we bless? Borei pi adama, right? So you dip it into the vinegar, as we said, right? Vinegar is the best one. We bless borei pi adama. And you eat, right? That's the way it's done. And we don't bless afterwards, also, right? So why don't we bless afterwards? Because we didn't eat a kazait. So when you don't eat a kazait, you don't bless. And why don't we eat a kazait? Because if we would eat kazait, there won't be a doubt whether we should bless the after blessing or not. So we're doing everything with wisdom here, you know what I mean? To avoid all kinds of pitfalls and problems. That's the whole thing. Everything in the Torah, in halakha, is done with wisdom, with the good sense and good logic, everything, right? That's the whole thing. Good. So then he says, right after that, Vekach matzah. So then we take the middle matzah, right? That's what we talked about yesterday, right? That middle matzah, and it should be matzah shmura, right? Don't bring your box matzah, right? Your square matzah here, right? This is not the purpose of that. Bring your shmura matzah, the round one that's handmade. Better buy that if you don't have it yet. I heard that, by the way, they're very short in the stores. They ran out. A lot of the stores don't even have it anymore. It goes like hotcakes, What can I tell you? So make sure you get it. So okay. So anyway, right? We take the middle one, and we split it up into two pieces, right? We said, right, that whole thing yesterday, that whole ritual. So half of it you give to one of the people on the table there, right? And he hides it right under the tablecloth, right? The shomra l'apikoman, to save it for the apikoman. V'notanin ota tachat mapa. As we said, we put it on the tablecloth. The chetzia sheni yasin ben shtei hashlemot, and the other half you put it right in between the two complete matzot. So the agbia kara, then you pick up the tray. Sheyesh ba hamatzot. You have the matzot there, the omar, and you say like this, right? Halach mania. This is the bread of poverty. That whole thing, right? That whole statement there. Ad manishtana, until manishtana, you stop there, right? That's the next phase. You pick it up and you say that, stop there, and right, it says the Ramah here, ואמרו בלשון שמבינים, הנשים והקטנים. So it says, right, that it should be said, all these things, in a language which is understood by people there, you know? So that's why a good father, right, whatever, the head of the household there, should translate, you know, the Haggadah into English, right, or whatever, the language that's spoken in the house. Because not everybody understands Hebrew, you know? So you gotta make sure they get, you know, they get the point, the main points of the Haggadah. You translate it for them, right, and the whole thing. So that's an important element, you know, of the Haggadah. It has to be said in a language that people understand. Okay, so that's that. Then he goes on. או יפרש להם העניין וכן עשה מלונדרי כל אגדה בלשון לעז, right? So he said that's the way this rabbi did, right? That he mentions here. He used to translate the whole thing into, right, to the language of the land, right? The local tongue, whatever, right? That they spoke there. He translated into that language. In order that the women and the children should understand, because they don't speak Hebrew, you know. In those days, the women didn't go to school, you know. So how are they going to know Hebrew? Who's going to teach them? Right? So they don't know how to read in those days. As I say, you know, you've come a long way, you ladies, right? That's not what it used to be. You've come a long way. In those days, women didn't know how to read, you know, or very little, you know. Their reading abilities were very limited. They had no school for girls, nothing. The women just stayed at home, helped their mothers. You know, that's what they did, the girls. Okay, so that's the story there. And goes on. So then it says, right, it says Shulchan Aruch, comes back to Shulchan Aruch here. ואז יצווה להסירם מעל השולחן. And then, as we said, right, you'd pull this trick now, right? What's the trick? Tell them, okay, remove the tray from the table, please. Right? And put them at the end of the table, right? All the way down, you know, at the end of the table. As if like they already ate. Why is that? So the children should be inquisitive and ask questions. Why this? Why that? Right? All that stuff. Okay. Good. So we're done with that. Let's go to Zion. Okay, we got to see the tour here a little bit. Okay, so it says here, so it says it through like this, right? As we mentioned already some of this before. It says here, right? Some are particular, to remove the cooked dish from there. That when we pick it up the tray, right? Because they say, right, that we don't have to pick up the meat, you know. So if it's on the same tray, the meat and the matzah, right? what they do is they remove the meat, the meat of the cooked dish. We don't say to, so it says you don't have to do that though, right? You don't have to remove the cooked dish from there. The dafka kashomer pesach shayu avotenu ochlin, because he says, right, when you say pesach that our forefathers used to eat, the korban pesach, the sacrifice, beha kamar shelo lagbia. So there we say, right, don't pick up the the cooked dish. Why? Because you may think that people may think you sanctified it for the temple. Right? But it says that which he picks up the table, the tray, and only it doesn't look like that. That he sanctified it. And then, right, he says we mix right away. We pour the second cup of wine. Right, in order that the child should ask, why are we drinking 2 cups before the meal? That's unusual. So it says if the child is not smart enough to ask these questions, so then the father teaches him to do it, right? He goads him into it. Something like, inspires him, right, to ask questions. Okay. So as we said, right, if no ben ishto shalto, if he doesn't have a son there, right, then his wife should ask him. Vim lavhu v'shol et atzmo, right? If he's just him, right, he asks himself, as we said, right? Vafilu bet tamid chachamim habekin b'halacha v'hilchot pesach. So it says even if there are 2 rabbis who know all the laws of Passover, right? Shoalim zed, they should still ask each other. In other words, it's a mitzvah to ask these questions, no matter how educated you are, no matter how smart you are, right? Whatever it is, it's got to be done. It's part of the procedure. Okay. So then he goes on. So it says, then you return the tray with the matzot in order that you should say the Agadah with the matzot there, right in front of you. Right? So as it says, right, in the Gemara, that why they call it the bread of right, oni, right, which sometimes we call that poverty. But here it means onim, right? In other words, we say all kinds of things in front of it. So what does that mean? We read the Haggadah in front of the matzot. Also, it should be in front of you when you pick up the right. You mention the matzot and the maror. But you have to say also, right? Every night, that we don't dip. Even one time, we don't dip our vegetables. But tonight, we dip twice. So, by the way, when is the second time that we dip? Anybody know? It says here we dip twice. The first time we dip is the karpas, right? What about the second time?
The maror, no? The
Right,
romaine lettuce.
Right. So what do we dip it into?
The haroset.
Exactly, haroset, right. Okay, very good, right? 50-50. 50-50 on that one. Okay, so that's great. That's it. That's the second dipping, right, that we do. Dip number 1, dip number 2. Okay. Good. So, right, there we go. So that's also another question, right? Why are we dipping twice? Sometimes, most of the time we don't even dip once. Good. So then he goes on. So he says also, now we ask another question, right? Which is that on the other nights, right? Usually, we eat other types of vegetables. But tonight, we eat romaine lettuce. You know what I mean? Usually we have iceberg lettuce. You know what I mean? That's right. Cucumbers, tomatoes. Tonight we're eating romaine lettuce. What happened, right? What's going on? Another question, right? Okay. By the way, from that you hear one thing, that you can't use iceberg lettuce for maror, right? That's not maror. Only romaine lettuce is maror. So don't get them mixed up, right? So make sure you got the right one. Okay. So yeah. Because iceberg lettuce is not really bitter, it's very mild. So it's not the same thing. In Israel, by the way, as I said, the lettuce over the iceberg lettuce, especially, it's like sweet. You can. It has a the fruits and vegetables there have an amazing taste. Something unusual. You don't taste that anywhere else in the world. So as we said, right, that yeah, it's a good life over there. We have to think about going. Start packing your bags, right? At least if you're not packing your bags, buy the luggage now, so this way you'll be ready to go. Especially if Mashiach comes, right? We have the Geulah, the night of Passover. You should be ready, You should be already packed and ready to go. Okay. So there is, by the way, a midrash, I don't want to scare you guys. But there is a midrash. You know what's called? Yalkut Shimoni, right? On the book of Ishayahu, on Isaiah. So it says there, right, that this war, which is going to be in the end of days, the way it's going to go is like this, right? It says that the king of right, the king of Persia, right? Yeah, guess who that is, right? I bet you can guess. The king of Persia is going to go and attack the king of Arabia, it says, right? Which is like Saudi Arabia, something like that, whatever, right? He's going to go attack him. And it says, right, the king of Arabia will go and take counsel with the king of Rome, right? Which is like maybe America, well, God knows, whatever, right? Biden, right? Whatever, right? The old guy, right? Uncle Joe, right? So he's going to go there, take counsel with him, the king of Arabia, and it says then the king of Persia will destroy the whole world, right? Which means that he's going to get some nukes. Right? That's how we right? Can you imagine? It says it can destroy the whole world. The king of Persia. Yeah, so you can see, right, that the today's events are, working up to that point already.
Iranian nuclear program.
Right, can you imagine? By the way, some say Persia is Russia because, they're like, they're brothers, the Russians and the Persians. They work together. Interesting. So anyway, right, they say it's like one nation, some people. So anyway, but what does that mean? He'll blow up the whole world, right? Then, right, it says there, the Jews will be worried, what's going to be with us? This guy went and he destroyed the whole world, right? This Persian guy, right? Maybe it's Putin, I don't know, right? God should save us, right? Whatever. So, and Hashem will tell, right, to the Jews, don't worry, all I did, this was for you, you're not going to be harmed. So the Jews are going to be saved, from that destruction that the Persians are going to reap on the world. It's a pretty scary midrash, but it's pretty coming pretty close to what we're seeing today. Not that far away. Use your imagination, right? Then you you get the idea. Okay, so that's the story there. Midrash, right? Usually we don't bring midrash, but tonight we brought one. Okay, for the honor of Persia, right? Whatever, right? The Persian invasion. Okay, so as we said, right, that then we ask one more question, right? That it says every night we usually, right? In other words, usually the rest of the year we eat, anything we want, right? Roasted meat, or cooked, or whatever. But tonight everything we eat is roasted, right? Another thing, right, which we differentiate. Tonight everything is roasted. So all these questions are being asked. ולפי שאין לנו פסח וקורא כל הגדה עד ונאמר ולפניו hallelujah. So he says, nowadays we don't have the Korban Pesach, right? So the truth is, right, we don't eat roasted meat, dafka, right? Precisely that's what we don't do. On the night of the Haggadah, we're not really allowed to have roasted meat according to most customs. So, you got to save that for some other occasion, right? Not for the night of the Seder. I guess the second night you could already have it, because it's not the reason doesn't really apply there anymore for the prohibition. Second night, yeah, something like that. Whatever. It's only a custom, not to avoid that. But anyway, the custom is to avoid that. But you could have it like for the morning meal, that's okay. Roasted meat. But not for the night, not for the Seder. Okay. So anyway, right, we said, if you remember what the reason is for that, right? Actually, we didn't talk about this custom yet, but I think we did, actually. We did mention it. That the reason is because they shouldn't think, that you're eating sanctified food, right, in your apartment building, whatever, right, or in your house, and not in the temple, right, outside the temple. So that's the reason why we don't do it. Okay. So let's go on. And then, right, the Korea Kol Haggadah, you read the whole Haggadah afterwards, right? You answer the questions of these 4 questions, and then you read the whole Haggadah. Ad ve'nomar lefanav hallelujah. And then right until the word hallelujah. And then we get the word matzah zo, this matzah, right? You have to raise up the matzah. To show it to the people there that are dining there. Why is that? To make them, right, to give them an appetite for it. That's what he says. Also, when you get to Maro, right, you pick it up, you show it to them, right? Look at that romaine lettuce, right? Doesn't it look good? Isn't it tempting? When you say Pesach, but it says when you say Pesach, don't pick up, right, the cooked dish there, that you have. Because it looks like you sanctified it, right, for to eat it outside the temple. So therefore you don't do that. So when we say Pesach, right, we don't pick it up according to this opinion. So right, he says the custom in Germany was that when they get to this, that point where they say lefichach, right, which means therefore, you pick up your cup, which is full of wine already, second cup, and until you finish the whole blessing there, right? Asher ge'alanu ve'achi ita b'midrash. That's what it says in the midrash. Shochar Tov, right? This midrash. Shemagia lefichach. When he gets to, that's what it says, right? When you get to that point, you take up the cup, right? You hold it. In order you should say this song, right? Holding the wine. Binyan brachat birkat halel. You're doing the blessing of the halel. So right, so it says regarding the blessing of the halel, there is a dispute, right, amongst the rabbis. Ritzba haya mevarech alav. So it says the Ritzba would make a blessing on this halel. Bet pamim, right? Twice. What does that mean twice? Because in the halal, right, we bless once in the beginning and once in the end. That's what we do. So this rabbi used to do it there also. Before eating. One before eating, one after eating. That was also custom. This rabbi. Rab Hai, and also Rab Hai, Rab Tzemach, Rab Amram, right? So there was a lot of big rabbis who used to bless on this. Nowadays, by the way, the custom is not to bless. Aval Haritz Giyat, but Ritz Giyat, right? Avi Ezri and these rabbis, Katvu she'en davarech. They said you shouldn't bless. Alav. Klal at all. Lefi shecholkim oto l'shnaim because we're dividing up into two different pieces. One piece we say before the seudah, before the meal, and one piece after the meal, right? That's the large piece, right? After the meal. So he says, if so, how can you bless? That we stop in the middle. Says also the Rosh was like that. So meaning what? He didn't bless. So he said that's the proper thing to do, right? Not to bless. As we said, right? Wherever there's a doubt, we don't bless. When in doubt, throw it out. As we said, right? Okay, good. Right. So now I just remembered, right? This just reminded me of what I forgot, when we started. Okay, finally, it came back to me. Another reason why, when there's a doubt, we don't bless is because the blessing doesn't hold back the mitzvah. You get my point? In other words, if you don't bless, the mitzvah you did still is a mitzvah. It doesn't hold back the mitzvah. So therefore, it's not really a crucial element of the mitzvah. That's another reason why we don't bless when there's a doubt. Good. So I got my cue over here, right, to remember my forgotten story there. So anyway, right, אין מהכבוד, ויש מקומות שנוהגים לקרוא את ההלל בציבור, כדי, right, so it said, so in other words, okay, so we said, right, that we read the Hallel, in the Haggadah, as we just mentioned now. There's a small piece and there's a big piece, right, over there. But he says they also have a custom to read it in the synagogue as well, right? And that's what we do, by the way, as I mentioned already, right? The Sfaradim, we read the Hallel, the big Hallel, with the blessings and everything in the synagogue before we go home. בציבור, כדי שלא יצטרכו לברך עליו בשעת ההגדה. So it's this way they don't have to bless on it when they do the Haggadah. ומה טוב ומה נעים היא מנהגה, ויש לו סמך ממסכת סופרים. So he said, this is a very good custom, he says, right? And it also has a support in the Talmud. Deita hatam, because it's written there, Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben, it says, right, Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadak, Omer, this rabbi says, right, Yud Chet Yamim ve'layla echad gomrim bahen ahalel. So he says, right, that there's 18 days out of the year that we say the big Hallel, right? And one night, right? So which night is that? Right, so it says, Gola, right, Kaf Aleph Yom, but it says in the diaspora, it's 21 days. Why? Because we have a second day of Yom Tov, right? So we do the Hallel twice. Ubet Lelot, and 2 nights, right? Umitzvah mina muvchar likrot Hallel bebet Lelot. So he says that the best way to do the mitzvah is to read the Hallel 2 nights, shel galuyot, right? When you're in the diaspora, because there's 2 nights of Yom Tov. Ulvarech alav, and to bless on it, ulomra beneima, and say it right, nice and slow, right, with a nice melody, the whole thing there, right? Make it like a nice opera there, to leavdil. Right? Ulkayem ma shenemar v'normema shemo yachdav, v'normema shemo yachdav. Kshehu koreh bebeto. So he says when you read in the house, in your home, you don't have to bless again, right? Because we already blessed in the shul. שכבר בירך עליו ברבים, ומתחיל להלל וקורא עד למעיינו מים. Okay, so good. I think we already said a lot here. So I just want to remind you one thing, right? That I think I already told you guys, but I'll tell you again. Maran, my rabbi said, Ravadia, he used to say that the women should also say it, the Hallel, before the Haggadah. So meaning what? They don't have to go to shul, right? Because they don't go to shul, women, right? They're too busy making the table, right? Cooking and preparing. But who has time to go to shul, right? On the night of Passover? Which lady has time to go to shul? You know what I mean? So therefore, right, the thing to do there is they say the Hallel at home before they start the Haggadah. And that's what the rabbi said, you should tell the ladies, okay, ladies, before we start the Haggadah, make sure you sing Hallel. With the blessings and everything, the whole thing, right? The big one, the deluxe version. Okay. So this is supposed to be like a big custom according to Kabbalah also. All the big Kabbalah guys are into this stuff, right? The Kabbalists are always writing how great it is to do that, right? And so forth and so on. So, right, if you're a believer in Kabbalah, especially, you should do it, right? Try to do it. Make sure you do it. It's also custom, as well. Okay, good. So, let's see the Bet Yosef. Let's see what we can find up here. We read a lot in the tour. Right. So as we said, right, the Bet Yosef, we pour out the second cup, right? Ad shoalim zeh lezeh u'manishtana, and then we do manishtana, right? So where is it coming from? Mishnah Braita. It's Mishnah Braita, Perek Arbe Psachim, right? In the Gemara, Kuftat Zayin Amud Aleph, שבכל הלילות אין לנו מטבילין אפילו פעם אחת. And then we said the questions of the Manishtara, that all the other nights we don't even dip one time, and now we're dipping twice. כלומר, האחי גרסינן ולא גרסינן, and so he says that's a proper text. And we don't have the text, אין לנו חייבים לטבל, that we're not obligated to dip. ואחי אמרינן בפרק הרבה פסחים, that's what we say in this Gemara. ותמה משום דאינו, אם דאם כן משמע דבלילה הזה, אנו חייבים לטבל שתי פעמים. So that would imply, right, we're obligated to dip twice tonight. But that's not really an obligation, right? The Tibur Rishon, the first dipping, right, is not really an obligation, he says, right? So therefore, that would be imprecise to say that we're obligated to dip twice. Then we just do it in order to make the kids inquisitive, as we said, right? They should ask questions. So there's no obligation really there. You know what we call that, right? It's a prop. We're doing a prop for the kids, right? So it's not an obligation; it's a prop. Okay. Good. So let's go on. ומה שכתב ואינו לומר העניין שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים בשר צרי שלוק ובושל משום דבסדר הגדה במשנה גרסינן הכי. So it says also that which he said, that we shouldn't say, right, that all the other nights we eat, right, any kind of meat we want, right, cooked, broiled, right, whatever. Why is that? Because in the Haggadah, that it's in the Mishnah, גרסינן הכי הוא צריך רבנו לומר דהיינה אין בית המקדש. So he says the reason why we don't say it is because it says in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, that since we don't have a temple, right, so this doesn't really apply to us, that we're eating roasted meat that night, because we're not. So then, right, why should we say that? Right? It's really it's just not true. It's a fake news, basically, right? So why should we say it, right? It doesn't make any sense. Then Bet HaMikdash Kaim, because the temple is not standing, and Lomar Ken, so we don't say that one, right? That question we don't ask. כשיגיע למצה הזאת צריך להגביה. So he says, right, when you get to this matzah thing, right, you got to pick it up, right, the tray. עד שנראה כאילו הקדישו לכך. So until it seems like, he sanctified it for this purpose. בפרק ערב פסחים, like it says over there in the, where's the source for that? Daf, right, in the פסחים. קט"ז עמוד ב'. ומה שכתב ונוהגים באשכנז כשמגיעים לפיכך מגביה כל אחד כוסו. And that which he said, right, that in Germany the custom was to lift up your cup when you say the word לפיכך. כך כתב הגאות מימוניו. That's what it says also in this book. And כתב הגור, says the הגור, כשנוטל הכוס בידו, when he takes the cup in his hand, כשמגיע ללפיכך, and then when it comes to לפיכך, right, נכון לכסות המצה, it's proper to cover the matzah there, שלא יראה הפת בושתו. Why is that? Because the bread should not be, right, insulted here, because we're not blessing on the bread, we're blessing on the wine instead, right, for kiddush. וכן מנהג נקי דעת, so that's the way, right, people do, the people who are people who are particular about their deeds. וכן מצאתי כתוב בתשובות האשכנזיות, that's why I found this book, it says, כתוב עוד שעד אותה שעה תהא דמצה מגולה, says until that point the matzah is going to be exposed, right, קצת, a little bit, כדי אמרינם לחם שעולינם עליו דברים הרבה, because we, read the Haggadah in front of the matzah, so it should be exposed a little bit. Okay, good. Yeah. So I guess we'll stop here. We'll continue. B'ezrat Hashem. We'll finish this chapter next time, and we'll continue from there. B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Get ready for the holiday. Make sure you do all your preparations. And we'll see you tomorrow. B'ezrat Hashem. Laila Tov. Chazak u'baruch.
Kavod ha'chav. Thank you so much, Amen.
God bless.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless. All the best. That's good.